They told him it couldn't be done. They said the maps were wrong. They said the fuel wasn't there, the roads weren't clear, and the Germans weren't broken enough. But in August 1944, one American general didn't care what the rulebook said. While the rest of the Allied armies were still fighting hedgerow by hedgerow in Normandy, George S. Patton was already thinking 3 moves ahead. He didn't ask how slow an army should move. He asked how fast it could move, and then doubled it. In just a few days, Patton's Third Army vanished from where it was supposed to be and appeared where no one believed it could be. German commanders panicked. Allied generals stared at maps in disbelief. Supply officers broke into cold sweats. Fuel ran out. Orders made no sense. Logic said stop. Patton said, "Keep going." What followed was one of the most insane, reckless, and successful advances in military history. An army moving so fast that even its own allies couldn't keep up. And when Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower finally saw where Patton really was, he didn't shout, he didn't argue. He just whispered 5 words that still echo through history. "Good God, he's already there." This is that story. By early August 1944, the war in Western Europe was supposed to slow down. That's what the books said. That's what the planners expected. The Allied invasion of Normandy had worked, but it hadn't been clean. The beaches were behind them, sure, but France was still a mess of hedgerows, blown bridges, wrecked roads, and stubborn German resistance. Every mile forward came with paperwork, planning meetings, and supply schedules that moved at a snail's pace. Then Patton showed up. George S. Patton didn't believe in waiting for perfect conditions. To him, hesitation was more dangerous than the enemy. While other commanders were focused on securing territory inch by inch, Patton had one obsession: momentum. Keep moving. Don't let the enemy breathe. Don't give them time to reorganize. On August 1st, 1944, the U.S. Third Army officially went live under Patton's command. On paper, it was just another army group entering the fight. In reality, it was about to blow a hole straight through every expectation anyone had. The Germans didn't see it coming. They were still reeling from the Normandy breakout, their units battered, communications shaky, leadership scrambling. They expected the Americans to pause, regroup, and slowly push forward. Instead, Patton hit the gas. Columns of tanks, trucks, and infantry rolled out with barely a pause. Orders came fast, sometimes too fast. Units were told to advance, then advance again, then keep advancing, often before the dust from the last move had even settled. Maps became suggestions, not rules. Patton didn't wait for supplies to catch up. When fuel was low, his men captured German depots and used enemy gasoline to keep American tanks moving. When roads were blocked, they went around. When bridges were down, engineers worked under fire or found another way across. Speed was the weapon. Some Allied officers thought it was insane. Others thought it was reckless. Supply commanders quietly panicked as Patton's army outran its own fuel lines, stretching logistics to the breaking point. But the results were impossible to ignore. German defenses collapsed, not because they were destroyed, but because they were constantly outpaced. Units expected Patton to appear days later, only to find American armor already behind them. Entire formations were cut off, surrounded, or forced to retreat in chaos. Every hour mattered, every mile counted. Patton knew something the others were still debating. The German army wasn't finished, but it was fragile. If given time, it could stabilize. If pressured non-stop, it would crack. So he never let up. By the time Allied headquarters fully realized how far the Third Army had pushed, Patton wasn't where he was supposed to be anymore. He was already somewhere else.
By mid-August 1944, Patton's army had a problem. Actually, it had a lot of problems, but one stood above all the rest: fuel. The Third Army was moving so fast that the supply lines simply couldn't keep up. Trucks were driving day and night, engines screaming, drivers half asleep at the wheel. The planners back at headquarters had calculated fuel needs based on normal advances, not Patton's full-throttle charge across France. Tanks don't run on courage, they run on gasoline. And Patton was burning through it like fire through dry grass. Some units were told to halt, not because the enemy stopped them, but because their fuel gauges were sitting on empty. American tanks sat silently at crossroads, engines cold, crews staring down open roads they couldn't follow yet. It was torture. Patton hated it. He raged at staff officers, cursed the supply system, and pushed everyone harder. To him, stopping meant giving the Germans exactly what they needed: time. Time to regroup, time to dig in, time to fight back. So he did what Patton always did: he improvised. American troops began raiding German fuel dumps whenever they found them. Jerry cans were ripped open, poured straight into American tanks. Enemy gasoline, enemy oil, it didn't matter. If it burned, Patton used it. Captured German vehicles were pressed into service. Roads became chaotic rivers of mixed equipment. U.S. stars painted hastily over German markings, anything to keep moving forward. Meanwhile, the Germans were unraveling. Their retreat wasn't organized anymore. It was desperate. Orders conflicted, radios failed, entire units fled without knowing where the front line even was. Some German commanders believed Patton had far more troops than he actually did, simply because he seemed to be everywhere at once. That illusion was deadly. Columns were ambushed from unexpected directions. Bridges were seized before demolition charges could be set. Towns fell not after long battles, but because the Americans arrived before anyone was ready to defend them. Yet the gamble had a cost. By late August, Patton's spearhead was stretched thin. One serious counterattack could snap it in half. Allied commanders above him grew nervous. This wasn't how wars were supposed to be fought. This wasn't cautious. This wasn't safe. And for once, Patton's instincts were about to collide head-on with reality, because the fuel really was running out, and the Germans, cornered and desperate, were about to realize they still had teeth.
Patton didn't slow down, but everyone else did. Back at Allied headquarters, the maps stopped making sense. The little arrows marking Third Army positions were jumping forward faster than the clerks could redraw them. Officers leaned closer, rubbed their eyes, checked timestamps again and again. "This can't be right," someone muttered. But it was. Patton wasn't just ahead of schedule, he was breaking the schedule. By late August, Third Army was so far forward it barely looked connected to the rest of the Allied forces. His flanks were wide open, his rear stretched thin, his fuel situation was critical, and yet he kept pushing. To Patton, speed was protection. Every hour he stayed still was an hour the Germans could recover, and the Germans were recovering. Not everywhere, but enough. In pockets across France, German commanders finally began to understand what was happening. This wasn't chaos, this was Patton. One fast-moving fist punching straight through before defenses could form. So they tried to hit back. German units launched sharp counterattacks against Patton's supply lines. Roads behind Third Army came under fire. Fuel trucks were ambushed. Bridges were blown just hours before American convoys reached them. For the first time since the breakout, Patton's advance felt fragile. A single bad decision could leave entire divisions stranded deep in enemy territory. Tanks without fuel, infantry without ammo, no quick way out. Eisenhower saw it clearly now. Patton was winning, but he was gambling. British commanders were furious. This wasn't cooperation, this was recklessness. They argued Patton was endangering the entire Allied plan, forcing everyone else to react to him instead of the enemy. Eisenhower stood in the middle. If he ordered Patton to stop, momentum would die. If he let him continue, Third Army could be cut off and destroyed. This was command at its ugliest. Meanwhile, at the front, Patton didn't feel like a gambler. He felt like a man racing a clock.
His intelligence reports showed German units scrambling, miscommunicating, arriving too late again and again. Every mile gained now meant fewer lives lost later. That was his belief. That was his obsession. But belief doesn't fuel tanks. By the final days of August, some Third Army units were literally counting gallons. Crews slept beside their vehicles, praying the fuel trucks would arrive before German artillery did. And then the order came down, not to stop completely, but to slow, to consolidate, to wait. Patton read the message in silence. This was the moment he feared most. Not defeat, not death, but hesitation. Because he knew something the planners didn't. The Germans weren't beaten yet. They were just catching their breath.
August 25th, 1944, Third Army was literally running on fumes. Tanks rolled forward, engines whining, crews praying every mile. Patton's forces were at the very edge of logistics. Supply trucks stretched thin, bridges and roads already damaged by retreating Germans, fuel running low faster than anyone dared calculate. At headquarters, his quartermaster was pale. "Sir, we're out. Literally, no reserves left. Nothing in sight." Patton didn't flinch. To him, war wasn't about waiting, it was about moving. "Then we improvise," he barked. Every captured German vehicle became a lifeline. Fuel was siphoned from abandoned trucks. Every gallon counted. Non-combat vehicles, leave them behind. Infantry would march if needed. No excuses, no stopping. The tension was electric. Officers whispered that the entire army could collapse without fuel. But Patton's audacity wasn't just reckless bravado, it was precision at full speed. He calculated every risk, every potential setback, and pushed harder than anyone thought possible. Fuel trucks arrived hours late. Columns of tanks waited. Soldiers slept beside their vehicles, engines ticking softly. Every mile forward now was a gamble with life and death, yet somehow they kept moving, defying every doctrine of warfare. Patton's diary later captured the essence. "I could have ended this war by Christmas. All we needed was fuel, but the line stretched too thin. I'd rather risk everything than slow down and let them breathe." And breathe the Germans could not. Third Army's pace was relentless. 100 miles in 4 days? Yes. Running low on fuel? Definitely. But surrender? Not an option. Speed was survival, audacity was strategy, and Patton's gamble, terrifying to some, miraculous to others, was paying off.
September 1944. Third Army's engines roared across northern France. But now the unstoppable surge met its harshest limit: fuel exhaustion. Soldiers could see the Reich on the horizon, tantalizingly close, yet every mile forward had become a desperate calculation. The tanks stalled. Supply lines had snapped. The army was literally frozen on enemy soil. Patton walked the lines, eyes sharp, mind racing. "We'll get fuel," he promised his men, "and when we do, we're crossing straight into Berlin." The soldiers trusted him, but inside, even the audacious general felt the weight of reality. Every idle hour was a gift to the Germans, time to regroup, fortify, strike back. Officers grumbled, morale wavered. Patton's presence was the only thing keeping spirits from crumbling. "Keep moving in your heads," he barked, pacing alongside stalled tanks. "We may not roll today, but we're still a force to be reckoned with." Reports came in from the front. German patrols observed them, snipers picking off the slow-moving units, artillery occasionally pounding supply convoys. Yet, despite danger, the Third Army remained poised to explode back into motion the moment fuel arrived. Patton's mind was already calculating the next 48 hours, imagining the army rolling, tanks crushing roads, infantry storming positions, all while the Germans scrambled to react. This halt was temporary. The Germans didn't know the army could start moving instantly, faster than doctrine predicted, once Patton had the lifeblood of the campaign: fuel. Every officer knew the truth. The general's audacity wasn't just reckless, it was a weapon. He had stalled, yes, but only to strike with precision once the supply veins were flowing again. In the shadows of stalled engines, amid the whispers of anxious soldiers, Patton's confidence burned brighter than ever. We're not stopping. 1 gallon, 1 truck, 1 man at a time. We surge when ready. And when we surge, we strike where they least expect.
October 1944. Fuel convoys finally reached the front lines. The roar of engines returned like thunder across northern France. Patton's Third Army, paused only briefly, now surged forward with a vengeance. Tanks ripped through the countryside. Infantry moved at a blistering pace. Artillery boomed behind them. The Germans barely had time to register the renewed assault before American forces were already on the move. Patton didn't wait for perfect logistics or cautious consolidation. Every captured fuel depot, every abandoned German truck was immediately pressed into service. His orders were clear: keep moving, strike hard, strike fast. Non-combat vehicles walked if fuel was short. Every gallon was dedicated to the tanks and frontline soldiers. The army became a living, breathing juggernaut, a force the Germans couldn't predict or stop. The pace was insane. Roads choked with tanks and trucks. Infantry ran alongside engines, rifles ready, eyes scanning for ambushes. Yet Patton's men trusted his vision. They'd seen what he could do. Hesitation was dangerous. Hesitation meant giving the enemy time to breathe, to fortify, to strike back. Patton's audacity kept them alive and unstoppable. Messages back to Eisenhower painted a surreal picture. Over 100 miles in 4 days, tanks and infantry fully engaged, fuel stretched but secured, enemy disoriented. Eisenhower, though worried, couldn't hide his awe. Patton was breaking every rule of conventional warfare and winning. By mid-October, Third Army reached the Seine River, weeks ahead of schedule. Engineers improvised crossings, infantry ferried themselves on captured German boats, tanks forded shallow points. German commanders could hardly comprehend the speed. Their defensive lines crumbled before they even realized the threat. Patton's army had turned audacity into strategy, proving that speed, risk, and relentless pressure could achieve what seemed impossible. Through forests, villages, and rivers, Third Army pressed eastward. Each mile covered was a psychological blow to the Germans, a testament to Patton's genius in mobile warfare. Eisenhower watched the map in disbelief, muttering the words that would echo in history. Good God, he's already there!
November 1944. Third Army was now on German soil, engines echoing across ruined towns and shattered villages. Patton's vision had turned audacity into reality. His army had pierced deep into the heart of enemy territory, miles ahead of schedule. Every step was both triumph and tension. Fuel shortages, exhausted men, and disrupted supply lines loomed as constant threats. Yet there was no hesitation. Patton's orders were uncompromising: advance at all costs. Captured enemy fuel, abandoned trucks, and ration improvisation kept the army moving. Soldiers called it a miracle, the audacity of leadership that refused to accept limits. Tanks barreled down cobblestone streets, artillery pounded entrenched positions, infantry pushed through towns with determination and precision. Speed was their shield, risk their weapon. German forces scrambled, disoriented, and outmaneuvered. Commanders attempted counterattacks, but Third Army was already gone, leaving chaos in its wake. Patton's 90-degree pivot across Brittany to Paris had shattered expectations, defied doctrine, and demonstrated one essential truth: audacity and decisiveness can rewrite war itself. Eisenhower watched the unfolding reports with a mix of fear and admiration. Every mile gained was proof that Patton's boldness saved time, lives, and potentially shortened the war. The messages arriving in SHAEF headquarters read like impossibilities. Over 600 miles in 30 days, towns liberated, enemy divisions neutralized, casualties remarkably low. Eisenhower could only shake his head and whisper the words that would define Patton's career. Good God, he's already there. By late November, Third Army stood poised on the Rhine, fully resupplied and ready for the final push into Germany. Patton's men, fatigued but electrified by their momentum, knew they had witnessed history. The combination of relentless speed, improvisation, and bold risk had achieved what no one else believed possible. Patton had not just advanced an army, he had redefined modern warfare, proving that speed, decisiveness, and daring leadership were as lethal as any weapon. The story of Patton's August-November campaign became legend. Audacity over orthodoxy, speed over caution, improvisation over rigidity. Eisenhower's 5 words captured it all. Good God, he's already there. The legacy was clear. Third Army's unprecedented advance, driven by a general who refused to be constrained by convention, changed the course of the war and left a mark on military history that would inspire commanders for generations.